Bears suck.
Third down, Fields. There's room to run for Fields. Oh, turn it on to speed.
Wake up. This is Out High Bear Nation.
What's up, everybody? Good morning, almost good afternoon at this point. Welcome into another episode of Out of High Bear Nation right here on the Undefeated Sports Network. As always, I am Andrew Tarbill. To my side is my guy, Angelo Ace Camacho. What's up, Ace? How we doing this morning, man?
What up, Tarbill? Been a minute. Had a lot of holidays were here and family was in town, and
Absolutely.
I think it was a nice little break we had. But I'm ready to wrap up this abysmal season and get ourselves focused on next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at the state of this current Bears roster, man, and it's pitiful to say the least. I mean, we have Nathan Peterman, a guy who threw 5 interceptions in 3 quarters of NFL football, starting for the Chicago Bears this afternoon. And ultimately, I would have liked to see Justin Fields be able to get that rushing record, even if they only put him in for 1 or 2 plays to get those 64 yards he needed to beat Lamar Jackson, and then they pulled him out for the rest of the game. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but I think ultimately management came down and said enough with Justin Fields. You hear the reports of the hip injury, but I just think it's a little too convenient on the timing. I believe that there were some underlying conversations there that weren't made public, and obviously with the state of the team, it makes sense, right? You've won 3 games. You're not going to win today. If you lose today and Houston beats Indianapolis, which is a real possibility because they're on their 4th string quarterback, the Bears could be looking at the number 1 pick in this year's draft, which, we talk all the time about draft capital and how of 1 to 2, even 5 spots are so significant in the draft regarding capital, especially when you look at those 1st through 5 picks. And this year, with the quarterback situation in the draft really being that there's 2 quarterbacks and then no one in Bryce Young and CJ Stroud.
Right.
If the Bears do end up moving up to the number 1 pick, I think they could get a phenomenal haul from whatever team wants Bryce Young, because I do believe he will be the number 1 pick. I think Stroud will go directly after him, and then it'll go to the guys like Will Anderson Jr., but we can get into that a little bit more later.
Right.
Overall, abysmal season for our Chicago Bears.
We all kind of knew that this was the season we were in for, right? I mean, if you're an objective fan, and I know there's, the meathead diehard fans that are like, oh, well, if you don't expect them to win every single week, you're not a real fan.
That's not the
narrative, and we've talked about this before. We wanted to see one thing this year and one thing only, and that was the development of Justin Fields, period. End of discussion, right?
And we have seen that. Ultimately, that's you still have the fair weather fan or the meathead guys in the media that are saying we still haven't seen enough out of Justin in the passing game. And yes, I agree. As an analyst, I would like to see more out of the passing game, but the reality of the situation is, who is Justin Fields going to throw the ball to? And that's been the issue over the past few weeks, really since Darnell Mooney got hurt. Then Chase Claypool had a stint where he was out. Like if Dante Pettis and Equinemius St. Brown are your number 1 and 2 options, you've got major issues. Obviously, injuries have plagued this team throughout the season, and Justin Fields, man, say what you want about him, but I think he was around 2,200 yards passing and just over 1,000 yards.
22-42 with a 85 QBR, 17 touchdowns, 11 interceptions.
Ultimately, that's not a bad season for a guy who has absolutely nothing around him.
Right.
I think that's where fans need to reevaluate a little bit and kind of just understand where the state of this team is, right? Like ultimately, if Justin Fields had a guy like Cooper Kupp, who could be a possibility for a wide receiver the Bears go after in the offseason, or a Devontae Adams or a Justin Jefferson, if he had a true in and out number 1 and this team was not progressing in the passing game, I would be a little bit concerned. However, ultimately, his best option was Darnell Mooney before he got hurt. Right. And we've talked time and time again about how Darnell Mooney is just not a true number 1 receiver.
I agree.
Thought maybe we would see him take some steps this year. And I think before he got hurt, he was doing okay, but he definitely has shown that he's a guy that could be a solid 2 or 3 option, but he needs other guys around him to be able to perform. Right. Obviously, with Allen Robinson on this team last year and then departing, that was our true big-bodied number 1 guy. Then Darnell was asked to step up, and it's just when teams know that he's the number 1 option and they take him out of the game plan, there's not much depth behind him there to go to. Right. I mean, you've got Byron Pringle, you've got N'Keal Harry. For whatever reason, the coaching staff has not wanted to put them out on the field consistently. It's been hit or miss. The utilization's been around probably 40% for both of those guys. And then you've got a young, very much so unproven rookie in Velus Jones Jr., who, although he's done some really great things the last few weeks in the return game, has ultimately struggled on the receiving end. So with that being said, let's get right into our first topic here. So, excuse me, is this the most lackluster end to a season? I absolutely think this is the most lackluster end to a Bears season that I've ever seen. Nathan Peterman, I just want to gravitate on the fact that he threw 5 interceptions in 2.5 quarters of football once for the Buffalo Bills. That is the guy that we are putting out there as the starter for our Chicago Bears today.
Right.
If the Bears had any indication or any want to win this game, I think Justin Fields would be playing. Obviously, the team's in full tank mode now, given what's at stake in the draft, right? Do you agree, Ace?
I definitely think that this was a week too late. I think they should have made this decision last week before that Detroit game. I know that, Justin can learn from all these scenarios. After halftime of that Detroit game, he learned absolutely nothing. Nothing good happened in that game except how to not get completely annihilated, because he was getting annihilated. And it was probably the worst game I've watched this season of the Bears in terms of overall effort. The team just didn't seem to really care that they were there.
I was going to say, you could definitely tell as the game was going on that the players were kind of playing half speed. And
right.
It's frustrating because Coach Eberflus preaches, consistency, playing hard, the hits principle. And ultimately, we did not see that.
The only hits principle we were seeing was
Detroit.
Fields hitting the ground. That was it.
Time and time again. And ultimately, I think they played him because they wanted to see him break that record, just to give him some sort of a milestone and accomplishment in a season that was very lackluster for the team overall, which I can respect, when a guy's that close to a record, wanting to let him get that record. But if you're putting him in harm's way to do so, as they were against Detroit, there were 7 sacks in that game?
Yeah, it was not pretty. The whole team,
No.
you lost 2 offensive linemen in that game, and you're still running your franchise quarterback out there behind, and the offensive line was already bad. Then you lose 2 guys on the offensive line, and now you're asking him to still produce. It was just a recipe for disaster. I said it on Twitter. It was like coaching malpractice to just keep him in there and taking the abuse that he was taking. Granted, yeah, he didn't make it easy on himself at times, but I feel like he felt he had to, and I felt this way all season. He's had to carry the entire team on his back, because without him, that offense is nothing, right? There's 0 offense on this team if he doesn't do it.
So one thing I want to get into before we move to our next topic, Ace, David Montgomery, Mr. Really Understand Me, posted on Instagram 2 days ago, I believe it was now, last ride 32, with a picture of himself in his Bears uniform. We've touched on it briefly, but just to recap here for those that are new listeners this morning, I do not believe David Montgomery is a part of this team next year. I think that message that he posted on Instagram was not till next season last ride. It was he's well aware that this is his last ride in a Bears uniform, because he will be moving on in the offseason.
Right.
Now, I guess for starters, do you agree there, Ace? Do you think that David Montgomery is no longer a Bear come the start of next season? And then on the flip side of that, do the Bears go after a back in free agency? Because Josh Jacobs is rumored that he's going to be available. There's been reports that there's interest in Saquon Barkley, although I cannot see the New York Giants giving up Saquon Barkley, and I can't see Ryan Poles wanting to pay Saquon Barkley what it would require to get him here in Chicago. What's your thoughts, Ace?
So the idea of going into free agency, I know you have a whole bunch of money, but the idea of going into free agency and trying to pay top dollar for a running back is
it's a bad idea
to me. Yeah, without a doubt.
Right.
I'm not saying running backs don't matter, but in the grand scheme of needs on this team, running back is
plug and play.
Right. And it's probably 7, maybe 8, maybe 9 on the top 10 list of things needed for this team this offseason.
I don't even think it's in the top 10, honestly. I mean, you look at where this team's at, and Khalil Herbert's been able to produce. Obviously, I'm not sold that Khalil Herbert's a 3-down back, but I think a combination of him and Ebner could work next season if the Bears don't go after someone. Right. I don't think free agency is the right move. I think they'll reach down into the 4th or 5th round and pick up another back, maybe even 6th, as they did last season.
Here's my thought.
Hope that they hit on a guy.
I would pull David Montgomery in and say, hey, man, listen, you've played your ass off for this team. Clearly, you're one of the top guys that is looked to on this team as a leader.
Absolutely.
Let's find somewhere we can meet in the middle that's going to be friendly for both you and the team. That'll still give us the wiggle room we need to bring pieces in to help him succeed as well, because a better offensive line ultimately means that he's going to have more holes and he's going to have the ability to, make more happen on that offense if there's more protection and blocking being done the correct way.
And ultimately, I really hate to say this because David Montgomery is a great character guy, but ultimately his production, he fights for every yard that he gets, and I love the heart and determination the guy has. Aside from that, David Montgomery is not a top 5 back in this league. And the reality of the situation is he's a great character guy, brings high energy, intensity, passion for the game to the locker room. However, I just don't think that Montgomery he's not Saquon Barkley. He's not not one of the top backs in this league right now. He's not Derrick Henry. I love what he brings to the team in terms of character and his determination, but I just don't think that he's a guy that you give, 15 million a year to, or whatever that number would be, to retain him here in Chicago. I think, as you said, if you can come to a team-friendly deal that makes sense for both sides, yeah, absolutely re-sign him. It's a no-brainer. He's one of the leaders in that locker room. But if he's requesting, top 5 running back money, I don't see the Bears coming to a deal on it. And, our guys on ESPN 1000 talk about it a lot, especially Carmen and Yurko. Yurko has the philosophy that you don't pay running backs because they're plug and play. And ultimately, I agree with that principle. I just think that, the Bears could go out and get another guy. You look at the running backs that the Bears have had over the past few cycles, we'll say. David Montgomery now. Before that, Matt Forte was your guy.
Jordan Howard.
Jordan Howard
Patterson.
Howard there in the middle. Cordero Patterson, Tariq Cohen.
Yeah. I mean,
Tariq Cohen's trying to make a comeback, sign him for the league minimum and bring him in as a gadget guy.
I think this team has a Velus Jones for that.
Yeah, personally. They do.
I mean, I don't know. I would probably rather take Tariq at this point than Velus, to be honest. But
Tariq was a little bit too east-west for me. I do wish him well because he was another big locker room character guy, but ultimately I don't see him coming back here. But maybe he does sign to a team next season, or maybe we see him in the XFL. Who knows?
Right.
We're going to be talking about that very soon. Our St. Louis Battlehawks will be flying, hopefully, to a good season. Moving forward,
St. Louis Battlehawks. I should leave this show after that comment. I'm just kidding.
Hey,
everything The Rock touches is gold, so I'm sure it'll be good.
Just like his tequila, it'll be phenomenal, hopefully.
His tequila is incredible. If you haven't had it, I definitely recommend.
Absolutely. So moving forward to our next topic here, Ace, since we're a little short on time this morning, we've got our next topic here, jonesing for success. Will Velus Jones be able to see success next season? I'm going to start with this one. I think that Velus Jones is another case of expectations being too high for a player. He was drafted in the 3rd round as a return man. This team knew that he was good in the return game, which he has delivered, especially over the last 3 to 4 weeks. He's really turned it on in the return game, done a really good job there. This guy was drafted as a returner with some upside at the receiver position. We, out of desperation, threw him into a larger, more expanded receiver role due to lack of depth on this team. So I think for me, it's difficult to say that Velus Jones is or isn't living up to the expectation. I think that he's saved himself from being considered a bust for sure with what he's done in the return game over the past few weeks. I do believe Velus Jones will be successful on this team next season. He's a bigger bodied guy. He's fast. He's just got to get his hands down, got to kind of get rid of the nerves, I think. And that's all going to come down to consistency on the football field and seeing a more expanded role. Obviously, over the last couple weeks, he's been in more than he had previously just due to the depth issues. But I think you see them define a spot for Velus Jones during the offseason. And I believe he's probably your number 3 target at wide receiver moving into next season. I do think he'll be successful. If this team does everything that they need to do in the draft and free agency, I believe that Velus Jones will be just fine next season. Honestly, I'm not concerned at this point. Again, 3rd round pick. He's shown great promise on the return game. Give him some time. I think year 2 will be much more improved for Velus Jones.
I'm going to agree 95% of what you said. I think the expectation, I agree. Expectation level got raised a little bit too high. I think with the excitement, everybody wanted Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace out so badly that they automatically assumed, okay, those guys are gone. It's got to be better than what they were, right? But the roster they left this team and the financial blunder that this team was in really made it difficult for anybody who was going to come into that position to see success this season, unless they just makeshift. They were plugging holes with stopgap guys that were going to be here for a year and gone, and that's not how you win ultimately, right? You can't just win.
It's not sustainable to do that.
Right. They picked the lane. You heard it all season. They picked the lane. They got rid of key defensive players that a lot of people were upset to see go. Smith, Quinn, Mack. They didn't re-sign Hicks. So you automatically knew that this defense was going to be bad. It wasn't good last year, and it was just going to get worse this year.
Absolutely.
But then you put all that pressure onto your offense to have to keep up with a defense that's struggling, right?
Right.
And then your offense has no wide receivers, that are realistically top 2 wide receivers on most teams in the NFL right now.
Right.
And then injuries happened, and you went out, you got Claypool. He hasn't panned out yet. And then you look to a guy that struggled returning punts and kicks and hoped that he would be able to make something happen. It was rough the first couple go. I think the last couple weeks you've watched him get a little more comfortable with the route running, and him and Fields have had a little bit of a connection, not much. Is there potential for him to shine and be one of the top 3 guys on this wide receiving core next season? I mean, it's always possible, but if to me, it seems like best case scenario for the Bears would be if he just sticks to returning and he doesn't have to play a vital part in the receiving.
So Velus Jones is second among all punt returners for yards currently this season. Don't know if you knew that prior.
I didn't.
But you look at the yardage that he's came up with and the things that he's been able to do in the return game, and it's promising, right? We haven't had a world-class punt returner, kick returner since the man, the myth, the legend, Devin Hester, whom I know you've interviewed previously, who is also a finalist for the Hall of Fame right now. So super happy about that. I just want to take a minute to congratulate Devin on that, and hopefully he makes it in this year, because that man deserves it more than anyone as a special teamer, in my opinion, ever has.
I'm glad you clarified as a special teamer. I'm 100% behind it. Like you said, I had the pleasure of interviewing Hester, a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Right.
Talked to him about, the Hall of Fame bid and what he thought of his career and where he thought of himself in the whole Hall of Fame topic and discussion.
Right.
In terms of guys that were electric that you had to watch when they played, I would put him up there with some of the top guys. I don't know necessarily if, a lot of people make a big deal about the changing of the rules for the kickoff and stuff.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to stop that up to Devin Hester.
I'm going to stop you there. I absolutely chalk that up to Devin Hester. Those are the Hester rules.
Why would the NFL take away a player that was so electric for the league?
So
I know one of the top franchises for the league.
I will say this. I think that those decisions were made because he was returning too many punts and kicks too often. And it was almost getting out of hand, right? It was like every time Hester touched the ball, Devin Hester, you are ridiculous, sir. Like it was coined that phrase for a reason, because every time he touched the ball, he had a chance to break it. Right. You look back to that opening opening return of the Super Bowl, the first kickoff there against Indianapolis, and he ran that kick back after Tony Dungy said, "Oh, we're not going to change our game plan. We're going to kick to him." Basically, we're not scared of him. And then look at what he did. He ran it back and shoved it down your throat. But I could sit here and reminisce on Devin Hester all day. Point is, with Velus Jones, I think if he has half the ceiling that Devin Hester had as a returner, the Bears are going to be very fortunate, because you just don't see electric returners like that often at all in the NFL.
I think a lot of returning right now needs to be focused on punt return, but unfortunately, the defensive side of the ball can't stop teams enough to give a punt return even a possibility. You know what I mean? And
can't stop a cold.
Right. If you can't get off the field on third down and make the other team punt, what's the point of a return guy?
Yeah, if it's third down and 25 and the Lions are able to convert against your defense, that's an issue.
Yep, 100%.
Moving forward here, Ace, before we wrap up for the morning, supermarket sweep. Should we have faith that Poles and Eberflus can get the right pieces this offseason? So Ryan Poles.
First. You mind?
No, go ahead.
All right. I think it's difficult to give 100% full faith in him just because of, and I know that the offseason last year, we knew, boom, they are getting rid of everybody. This team is going to be awful, right?
Right.
They got, like, we went over the trade. They traded Smith. They got rid of Quinn. They got rid of Mack. Hicks, they didn't bring Hicks back. They draft a guy like Velus Jones as a wide receiver. Lucas Patrick was a signing of theirs for this offseason. There's moves that are questionable, right? And then you look at guys like Brisker and Gordon, who to me seem like guys that are going to be key pieces of this defense for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Absolutely.
My biggest concern is they went out to address the offensive line. The guys they brought in, we figured there weren't a lot of great options, but the guys they brought in have not worked out well. Alex Leatherwood, he was kind of a shot in the dark, hopeful. He hasn't played well. Riley Reef hasn't played very well.
So can I stop you there just for a second? Alex Leatherwood was, as you said, a total shot in the dark, but it was a good shot. It was low risk, high reward if he panned out.
I agree.
So, and looking at some of the other moves that they've made, I do believe Chase Claypool will be successful in this offense next season. I do believe that Velus Jones will be successful in this offense next season. As you alluded to, both Brisker and Gordon are going to be, I would comfortably say, top 10 in their position next season.
You think they make a Pro Bowl next year?
I think one of them, one of the two, probably, if I had to pick right now, I would say Gordon makes the Pro Bowl next season, but we'll see. I don't hate any of the moves that Poles has made, other than, honestly, for me, letting Khalil Mack go. And I know the cap space and the situation, and I understand the reasoning behind why you did it. I'm okay with the Smith move. He was unhappy here. You probably weren't going to come to terms in the offseason anyway. Right. I'm okay with Robert Quinn, because Robert Quinn went to Philly and hasn't done anything since he's been there.
I think he just got off being injured.
Yeah, he did. So, he did just
Hicks,
come off IR.
Hicks hasn't played very well down in Tampa. Like,
he's another guy that's been injured throughout this season.
Right.
Khalil Mack was in the Pro Bowl, had a pretty damn good season this year. And, I just go back, to me, it's always, I remember his debut against the Packers where he sacked Aaron Rodgers multiple times. And it was like, okay, this is a piece for us to build around moving forward.
He had that strip sack touchdown on Jordan Love. It was, my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever for this team.
Although this team has, I do have to say, it popped up in my memories. It's been 4 years as of January 6th. It's been 4 years since the double doink game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's crazy.
When we were talking about lackluster game, like endings to the season, it made me think back to Cutler's last game for the Bears when the Bears played the Lions on January 2nd. And I went to that game.
Yep.
Just because I'm a big Cutler fan, and I was like, I don't think he'll be here next year. I want to see him. It was an awful game. It was brutally cold, and that might have been the most lackluster game I've ever had in my life. Maybe because I was there, it wasn't as bad. But it's been a rough go here for Bears fans.
Absolutely. I mean, the 2018 season, so much has changed since then. Obviously, Bears champions of the North in 2018, phenomenal defense. Then we go through a few lackluster years. We bring in Coach Eberflus and Poles. They tear everything down. It's all about how they build it up in this offseason. So to allude to that real quick, and I don't know, I have faith that Ryan Poles is going to go out and select the right pieces in free agency. If the Bears landed a big-time receiver, and I'm not saying either of these guys are coming to Chicago, but if the Bears land a guy like Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams in the offseason and solidify that true number one position, Cooper Kupp could be a real possibility from what I've read and what I've heard.
I was reading that Sean McVay is contemplating not coming back. And
so if that's the case, if Ryan Poles goes out and throws the kitchen sink at Cooper Kupp, brings him in, makes some right moves in the draft. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces that need filled on this team. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our bare bones segment so we can discuss those pieces.
Play to the whistle, man. Let's be great today. Let's be great. Win out 3, 1, 2, 3. Win.
And we are back here on the Undefeated Sports Network, out of hibernation, USN's premium Bears pregame show. Each and every week, we take you through our 3 keys to a Bears victory. However, we're going to switch it up here for the last week of the regular season and go into our 3 biggest needs for this team in the offseason, whether that be free agency or the draft. Number 1, defensive end. Obviously, this team needs an edge rush presence. It's something that's been lacking all season horribly, to say it nicely.
Yes.
So, you look at a guy like, obviously, Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, what they can bring to the defensive side of the ball, and it's very easy to say, oh, just go ahead and go get one of those generational players out of the draft. However, ultimately, and a lot of fans probably aren't going to want to hear this, I think the right move for the Bears is to trade down with their first round pick and get a haul of picks for this year and next year. This year especially, I mean, if you move from 1 or 2, depending on what happens today, down to 5, you could easily get 3 more picks in this year's draft, and you could maybe still get a guy like Jalen Carter or Anderson, depending on how the draft board falls. And obviously, if you go 1-2 QB, or one of those 2 guys goes second, and then Stroud goes 3rd or 4th, there could still be there's going to be a quality player there at 5 or 6, or even really in the top 10, you're still going to be able to get a quality player and expand your ability to pick in the draft this year. I think that's a key to the Bears' success, is trading down and utilizing the most picks that they can. This team has so many holes to fill. Number 2, offensive line. really you need to bring in at least 2 more offensive linemen, whether that's through free agency or the draft, maybe even 3 if you're talking for depth purpose. This team definitely needs to bring in people and at the offensive line, and it's clearly evident that we need to get Justin Fields some more time in the pocket, as well as get our running backs some guys that will actually block and create holes for them. So ultimately, I think that this team trades down. I think that's the right move to utilize as much as they can in the draft as far as picks go. And then you look at number 3, wide receiver. We touched on it a little bit. Cooper Kupp may not be on the Rams next year. That's a guy I would absolutely go after. Devontae Adams is really good friends with Derek Carr, and he's frustrated with the Derek Carr benching. Maybe he wants out. Now, I'm not saying that Devontae Adams is definitely still a top-tier receiver. I don't think the Bears would pay him what he would require to come to Chicago, just because there's so much money in that contract, and the Raiders would want whatever team he goes to absorb
most
60 to 70% of that contract. And he's a guy that's going to be 30 next year. So, that's usually when receivers start taking the downturn. So I don't know about him, but if the Bears are ultimately able to go out and get a guy like Cooper Kupp, a true tried and true number 1, whether that is through the draft or through free agency, you get Justin Fields an undisputed number 1 target, and you let him cook next season. Now, I think really they need to get 2 receivers minimum that are top tier, upper echelon type guys to really improve this offensive roster moving forward. But if you go out and you get Cooper Kupp or somebody like that in free agency, and then you get a receiver in maybe rounds 2 to 4, somebody that is so I want to rewind a little bit and go back to last year's draft. The Velus Jones pick. As much as Velus has done well in the punt return game, I will say I think he was a miss because David Bell from Purdue was still on the board at that point, and I think he was the guy the Bears should have gone after. Seen some good production out of him this season. He's had some injuries, been out a few weeks himself, but ultimately, I think that Bell was the right move there. So, you go out and you get a guy like that in the 3rd round, plus an upper echelon receiver in free agency, and this offense could be cooking for 40 points a game next season. We could very easily have something similar to what the Chiefs have offensively if Ryan Poles plays his cards right in free agency and the draft. That's the reality of it. Is you've got a strong tight end in Cole Kmet. All the Cole Kmet doubters have been silenced, in my opinion.
I agree.
He's blocked. He can catch the ball. Him and Justin Fields have great chemistry. That's your tight end 1 moving forward. Sure, you would like another good depth piece on the other side. I don't think I can't even name the Bears tight end 2 right now. I think it's Ryan Griffith or Griffin.
I think you're right.
But ultimately, sure, you'd like to have another piece there, but that's not in your top 10 needs.
Right.
Moving forward, I think if the Bears take these 1, 2, and 3 that we have here, defensive end, offensive line, and wide receiver, seriously in free agency in the offseason, I believe this team will be a playoff team next season.
I mean, it shouldn't be difficult to be a playoff team next season. They added the extra playoff spot. The NFC, as you can see, is really just middle of the pack, except for maybe the top 2 teams in the NFC.
Agreed.
I think a lot
everything's up for grabs in the NFC.
I think a lot of these moves have to be done. I think you need to look at, you have all this money in free agency, right? I think there's pieces in free agency, while they might not be, big time name pieces, there's guys at the defensive line position, all across the defensive line. And
anything's better than what we have right now.
Right. You could get a couple guys, I think, from other teams, as long as they become available, that could get plugged right into that defensive line or offensive line and automatically make it a better unit just by one or two pieces. I think you look for those type of players, the offense, defensive line in free agency, and then utilize your draft capital to, like you said, potentially trade for a wide receiver that's disgruntled, or look to build depth on your team through the draft. I think Devontae Adams, I don't know. As much as I think it'd be cool to see him on the Bears, I don't know if you trust a 30-year-old wide receiver. I know what am I saying? He just is the number one wide receiver for the Raiders in history right now. So, maybe that's just me because he was a Packer. I don't know. But I do think that there are opportunities if Poles can make the right moves, where you could see this team. And here's the crazy thing, right? Even if this team is 3 times better than they were this year, that's only 9 wins. Right. So realistically,
that's one way to look at it.
If you're hoping that this team is, oh my God, I want them to be so much better, like they got to get a lot better to be,
this team's not going to be a 14-win team next season.
12 wins would make this team 4 times better next year than they were this year.
Ultimately, I mean, the offense is trended in the right direction with the little pieces that we do have, right? That's the thing. Justin Fields makes magic happen. He is undoubtedly your quarterback moving forward. For all the fans that want to say draft Bryce Young, stop it. We're not going to draft another quarterback. Unless the Bears draft Bryce Young with the number 1 pick, hold him as leverage to try to get a haul from another team. Ultimately, they're not going to give up on Justin Fields. Justin Fields is the future of this team, and all of the Fields haters really just need to stop it, because I'm sick of it at this point, Ace. I think the man has shown you he will do anything and everything he can to win a football game. He wasn't a runner in college. He ran for 1,000+ yards this season because that was what he had to do to try to make this team successful, given the limited pieces that they have. But let me get off my Justin Fields soapbox and back to the development of this team. I think if the defense can be somewhat competitive and hold teams to an average of 21 points or less next season, the offensive line and wide receiver core improve, this team could be dangerous next year. You could be looking at a team that can score 30+ points consistently. We've already seen it this season with very limited weapons. So you get the right guys around Justin Fields, I think he's going to be a world beater. And I think next season, I hate to say it, but I think next season you could see Justin Fields in the MVP conversation if the offseason plays out right.
I don't think that's crazy. I do think that it's going to be a fun offseason. I don't know. Fun is not the right word. Maybe intriguing.
It'll be an interesting offseason.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of storylines that you can kind of dive into to take this team really any direction going into next season. And that makes for good content for us because that gives us something to talk about. So,
absolutely.
We might not be every Sunday, but we'll definitely still be out, every few Sundays talking Bears, and any big news that breaks will be out there.
Absolutely.
We'll have a couple special guests on hopefully here in the next couple weeks to
Packers suck.
That's right. Packers suck to wrap the season. And it's been a fun year so far, not the wins we wanted, but watching Fields, it's been a good time. And let's get ready for an awful Bears game in 1 minute and move on to next season.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, guys. Thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate each and every one of you. We will be back, as Ace said. Our schedule may change a little bit given the Bears are done after this week, in case you guys didn't know, at 3 wins. But ultimately, we'll keep you informed. We appreciate all of you for listening. Please be sure to go like, subscribe, and follow the Undefeated Sports Network on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We are trying to grow on all platforms, so go hit that like and subscribe for us. Tell your friends about the great content that we are putting out here on the Undefeated Sports Network. Let's go watch this abysmal Nathan Peterman show.
Go Texans!
Everybody have a good day.